When three MBAs struggled with student loans, they knew there had to be a better way, so they created one. Now, Common Bond is a leading student lender, saving members up to $13,000 on MBA loans. Learn more at commonbond.co/touchmba. Common Bond Lending, LLC, NMLS number 1175900.
Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. What we do on this show is bring on admissions directors, students, and alumni from the world's top-ranked business schools to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what these programs stand for, what makes them different from each other, and, of course, how you can give yourself the best shot of getting in. We also offer free school selection help at touchmba.com. We believe that school selection is half of the process of making the right MBA investment. So if you need some help there figuring out, which schools would be within your range, which schools fit your interests, go head over to touchmba.com and we'd be glad to give you some free expert help over there. This week I had Matt Reesor on the show. Matt is from the Queens MBA program, which is based in Kingston, Ontario. And this program is very unique in that it's a 12-month program. It starts in January. There's a huge focus on teamwork in the program. And Matt will explain exactly what that means and why he believes the Queens MBA takes that a step further than most other MBA programs. It's very employer-focused. I think not only will you learn more about this top MBA program in Canada, but I think that Matt, being a professor of communication, and having worn many different hats in that MBA program, admissions, careers, he can really talk about what this program values and what they're looking for. And it's crystal clear to me. And that's the reason why I love doing these podcasts, is because, when you're chatting with someone like Matt for an hour, you really get a much better feel for the program than you could, I think, through a website. So I think it helps you kind of enter the mind of the admissions director, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Let's get straight to it. Matt Reesor is the director of the Queens MBA at the Smith School of Business, Queens University. And Matt has been with Queens since 2005 and the Smith School of Business since 2011 in a variety of leadership positions, strategic planning, careers, as a lecturer in communications. But of course, we wanted to get him on the show because he's directing the program. Matt also got his bachelor's from Queens, so he's an alumni of the university as well. Matt, I just want to thank you for your time and jumping on this podcast.
Well, thanks very much, Darren. I'm delighted to be here and look forward to speaking with you and telling your audience a little bit more about Queens MBA.
So the first question I will ask every guest on the show is just what makes the Queens MBA unique from other top MBA programs?
Absolutely. I think that's a key question. Obviously, there's so many different MBA programs out there, great MBA programs, but we're all slightly different. And I think if you're on that journey, considering your MBA, it's really important that you understand what makes each program different from another. So let me start in terms of our program, Darren, if I can, with just some of the pragmatics that make us somewhat, if not unique, but at least different in our particular marketplace. So we're a 1-year MBA, a 12-month MBA, which is fairly rare in the North American market. We went to a 1-year MBA 20 years ago now. So we were the first in Canada to go to 12 months. So as I said, in North America, the norm is certainly 2 years. There are a handful of programs out there like ours that are 1 year, but that would be one thing that I would think distinguishes us first. I think a second thing to keep in mind when you're considering our program is the fact that we're team-based. And I'd like to make the distinction, Darren, between team-based and group work-based. Clearly, any MBA program today is going to give you lots of opportunity to work with others in groups, and some will talk about teams as well. But I think our approach is very different than most other schools, and let me flesh that out a little bit for you if I can. So we only have 80 students in our program. And when we put our classes together, which start in January, I might add as well, that's another thing that's different about our program. Rather than a traditional September start, we start in January. So when we put the 80 students together, we look at the background profiles of all the students that we have in the class. So we look at everything from their undergraduate discipline to their age. The average age in our program is 28, but we'll get people between the ages of, I guess, the youngest side would be 23, the elder side would be 35. So we're looking at age demographics, we're looking at their academic background, years of work experience, career goals. We do a personality test as well called the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. And we put all of these characteristics together and we build teams of 6 or 7 students. And we're aiming for diversity here. And for the entire first 6 months of our program, so during what we call the core or the foundations of our program, so when you're going through the marketing course and the strategy course, finance, accounting, all those foundational business skills, you're actually with that same team for all of those courses. And roughly half of your grade in each of those disciplines will be derived from your team-based performance. So maybe that's a team presentation, assignments, reports, a combination thereof in each course. So we hold students accountable to not just working in teams, but working successfully in teams. And we don't just as well put these teams together and leave students to their own devices. Each team will get a team coach who works very closely with the teams to help them to understand what's best practices, what's the best ways to deal with conflict. We do expect conflict to come up when teams are working together. That can be healthy if people learn how to do that well. And so throughout the process, these 6 months, the students are learning how to work more efficiently and effectively as a team. Why do we do it this way? We do it this way because this is the way the world of work operates. You don't get to choose who's on your team in your office. There's lots of different people you're working with, some of whom have a background that might be similar to yours, others of whom have a background that's very different than yours. And you have to learn to adjust and work with those folks. So we put those teams together. You can't change your team. So you can't say after 2 months, you know what, I'd like to change my team. No, it doesn't work that way. Again, just like the world of work. So we've designed this team-based approach. We've been doing it again for roughly 20 years. So we've become quite astute at it. And it's interesting for us now to look at some of the data that's coming out of places like GMAC does their annual recruiters survey every year where they talk to Fortune 100 companies around the world about what characteristics they're looking for from graduates. And team skills and adaptability are very, very high on that list. So our program being team-based in this way, I think, is not only important in the job market after the MBA, but it's certainly something that's unique and that people need to think about if they're considering our program because it's different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was looking through what your students and alumni were saying on your website, and many of them cited that team-based approach as, foundational for them. Do you get to grade your teammates?
Yeah, there's a peer review process. That's a great question, Darren. So you don't formally grade them and give them a grade that appears on their transcript, but there is a process of peer review where students are required to give each other feedback. And obviously that feedback needs to be constructive. It can't just be, you're doing a great job, keep it up. You want to learn to give each other feedback about areas in which you feel that there's opportunities for improvement, areas in which they could improve the way that they work with you as a teammate. And that's all facilitated, again, by the team coach. So that feedback, the students learn how to give that feedback in the most effective and supportive way possible.
Yeah, and I noticed, speaking of the team coach, I saw that students get a team coach, a career coach, an executive coach, a lifestyle coach. Any more coaches? I mean, that's pretty unique. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, well, you're noting an important theme as well that does make us different. We believe very deeply in coaching. And, people come to an MBA, Darren, and a lot of people, I think, enter into this journey because they feel they need some of those core business technical skills that they haven't been able to pick up so far in their academic life or their work life. So that traditional, maybe you've got an engineering degree, you've been working as an engineer for 3 or 4 years, you've been exposed a bit to the business side, and you realize that, gee, I wish I knew more about financial modeling. I need to go and get an MBA so I can learn more about this and then accelerate my career. What we have noted is that, yes, of course, people come to do an MBA because they want to improve their technical skills, and we provide all of that in the classroom. But our approach through the coaches is to also give students an opportunity to improve on their professional competency skills, is what I like to call them. You might call them soft skills, but that's things like teamwork and working with an executive coach, as you noted. Your executive coach will sit down with you and work on those areas that, again, you can't really learn in a classroom. These aren't technical skills. But maybe it's something like, I mentioned conflict earlier, Darren. Maybe you have problems with dealing with conflict. You either avoid it or it tends to get you too emotional. These are the kinds of things that your executive coach can work with you on. Your career coach is there as well, obviously, to work with you on a one-on-one basis to make sure that you're going to transition into that post-MBA career that you're aspiring to achieve. So coaching is a very, very big part of what we do. And that's one of the reasons, in fact, that we keep our program small, because we can then provide that one-on-one coaching in a variety of areas for the students as they move through the program.
For our listeners who may be less familiar with Queens University, what is Queens University's reputation in Canada?
Good question. Yeah, it's one of Canada's oldest universities. It's 175 years old. So in fact, it's older than the country itself. So it's got a reputation as one of Canada's top research universities. We're in a medium-sized city by Canadian standards, I might add. So a medium-sized city in Canadian standards is about 150,000 people. But it has a reputation for having contributed to the political and economic leadership of Canada and, in fact, other places around the world as well for a long time. So it has a very solid reputation as an academic institution in Canada.
Yeah, and then, so academically, what about the business school? I know a lot of your graduates go into finance. Are you known as a finance school?
Yeah, I mean, these labels, are we known as a finance school? Yeah, to an extent we are, Darren, absolutely. I mean, if you look at our data over the last 3 years, between a quarter and a third of our students will go into some kind of finance-related role. Another quarter to a third will go into consulting, and then the remaining third rather would move into a variety of different areas. So we do have a reputation, certainly in the finance area, and I think there's some good reason for that. We have, for example, something that we call the Queens University Alternative Asset Fund, a bit of a mouthful. We call it QUAF for short, QUAAF. And what QUAF does is a student-managed hedge fund. So this allows students to work with real hedge fund investments and make those moves in the market in real time. They do that with an advisory board of alumni in the finance industry, as well as with professors to advise them. So as the students are deciding to make investments in the fund, buy, sell, etc., they bring those suggestions to the advisory board, who then asks them all the important questions to make sure that they're doing all of their due diligence and making a good choice. So something like QUAF, I think, is a unique experiential learning opportunity that students can't find at a lot of other schools. We have a reputation as well for some other experiential learning opportunities in the finance area. We have something called the Tricolor Venture Fund. Tricolor, actually, for those who are interested, refers to the 3 colors of the Queen's logo, which are gold, blue, and red. So Tricolor Venture Fund. And what it does is that's for those interested in either private equity, venture capital, or indeed in entrepreneurship. It provides students with the experience of, again, with real money, vetting startups and new companies, ventures that are looking for funding. And the students do all the due diligence, meet with the founders, visit their facilities, et cetera, look at their financials, and then make a recommendation about whether we should be investing any Tricolor Venture Fund dollars into that particular company. And that, again, is all student run with an advisory board behind them to make sure that they're they're learning as they go through, and they're making sound decisions.
And I noticed that students also have the option of getting, I'm not sure what you call them, but it's like joint degrees, like MBA plus Master of Finance, MBA plus Master of Management Analytics, MBA plus a Master in Science and Healthcare Quality. And I was wondering if those like healthcare analytics were also academic strengths of the Smith School.
Yes, analytics, absolutely. Our Masters of Management Analytics started, I think we're in our 5th year now. We started with 55 students in that program. And I think this year, I think we're going to have something like different sections, 250 graduates, something like that out of that program. That's actually offered out of our Toronto campus, Darren, as well, which is important that I mention this. We're based in Kingston, Ontario, which is only 2 hours from Toronto by car or train. But we also have a campus right in downtown Toronto in the financial district. So that management of analytics program is offered out of our Toronto campus. So if a student was really interested in analytics, then they could obviously take a couple of analytics courses during the MBA program. But if they wanted to dive deeper, they could do a dual degree and pick up both the MBA and the analytics degree. So analytics, we also have the Scotiabank Center for Analytics here at the business school, which is a research center. So analytics is certainly an area where we feel we have a core strength. Healthcare, similarly, where we actually harness some of the expertise outside of the business school to help with our healthcare offerings as well. So we've worked with our Faculty of Health Sciences as well as our School of Policy Studies to design that programming. So students aren't just getting the business of healthcare from the business side, but they're also getting it from the practitioner and the clinician and the policymaker side as well. So yeah, what we try to do in developing these dual degree opportunities is leverage some of the core strengths that we have at the school, either in research and also some of the broader strength that we have across the university as well.
What are you most excited about with the Queens MBA in terms of where it's heading and what you guys have done in the past couple of years?
What am I most excited about? I think what makes me, the most excited about where we're going is we have all of these opportunities now for students to customize their experience in a variety of different ways. And that could be doing a dual degree. Most students don't do a dual degree, but we get a handful every year that do. We have a really robust exchange network as well. So there's lots of international study opportunities that, again, not every student and most students won't do that, but a handful will. So there's all these different ways that we've been able to offer a way for a student to go through the program in a way that best suits their needs and interests. So I'm really excited as we continue to build out some of those opportunities for students to do that. And I think the second thing that I'm excited about relates to what I was speaking about earlier, about the balance between the technical skills and the soft skills. So we continue to try to devise new ways to improve what we do for students on the soft skill side. Last year, for example, we signed an agreement with the Canadian Olympic Committee. So what this agreement means is that for the next 8 years, we're the official business education partner of the Canadian Olympic Committee. And we have Olympic athletes studying in our programs now. We have 2 actually in the MBA program this year, so who competed in London and in Beijing actually, in both in canoeing. And so we have this opportunity not only to educate Olympians in our program and also the opportunity for students to study with Olympians, but we're also working with Olympic coaches and Olympic teams as part of this agreement to help us to reflect on all of this hard work we've been doing on coaches and teams for the past 20 years to say, okay, well, what's next? What's the next level? What can we learn from an Olympic coach about how they work with their athletes and translate that into what we're doing with our students in a business setting? So as we continue to roll out more and more of these opportunities for us to augment the students on the soft skill side, I think this is going to be really, really valuable for us and a key differentiator, to be honest, as we go forward, because everything that I'm reading, and I don't know about you, Darren, in terms of what employers are looking for, there's a real stress these days on things like communication skills and team skills and resilience and dealing with ambiguity. And I'm really excited about the programming that we're building to address those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, What was I going to say? I know how difficult it is to provide that degree of customization with a relatively smaller program. You mentioned about 80 students in each class and a one-year program too. How many electives are available, for example, to students at Queens?
So the students go through and they're taking 11 courses in the core. And then they have, so that's the courses that everybody takes. And then they have a selection of about 25 different electives that they can take as part of our program. We're also looking at opportunities now for students to pick up, and they can do this already to an extent where the calendar allows, to pick up electives from some of our sister programs as well at the school. So if you were really interested in analytics and maybe you didn't want to do a dual degree, but there's a couple of courses that you wanted to pick up in the analytics program or the Masters of Finance program or the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation program, we're trying to make those opportunities available. Another thing that I tell our students, Darren, is that I mentioned the exchange agreements earlier. We have about 35 exchange agreements around the world, all with top MBAs, I'm sure many of which have been with you on your show. And what I tell the students is if there's an area of study that you feel you really want to dive into, but to be perfectly honest, we don't have that depth that you're looking for, look at our exchange network as a curriculum extension. So if you're really, really excited about luxury brand marketing, for example, then, well, maybe you should be looking at Bocconi in Milan and looking what their offerings are, or ESSEC in Paris, for example. So I really encourage students to not just look at the exchange as a nice to have, some travel or an opportunity to build a network. It does all of those things, but that exchange is also can be viewed as a curriculum extension. So we've got about 25 of our own courses that students can choose from, and then again, a number from our sister programs as well. And then I encourage students to really look deeply at our exchange network as well.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it sounds very impressive. I mean, it almost sounds like an executive MBA in terms of the level of attention you give your students with all the coaching and all the teamwork-based pedagogy. My last question about the program is the location itself, Kingston. Why Kingston over Vancouver? Toronto are kind of usually the two big cities, at least I hear from applicants.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a fantastic place to live and study, particularly for the short term duration of an MBA. I mean, I often talk to students, and they've told me this, that it's almost like an MBA retreat to be here in Kingston. So you can step out from the excitement and to an extent the rat race of some of the larger urban centers and really focus on what you need to be focused on during your MBA. You know, BBC Travel actually also named Kingston one of the 5 great university towns in the world. I think that was in 2013 or 2014. It's really quite a fantastic city. It's located about halfway between Toronto and Montreal. Toronto is, as I said earlier, about 2 hours by train or car. Montreal is about 2.5 hours the other way. You've got Ottawa an hour and a half away. You can drive across the border to the U.S. in about 45 minutes from where we are. You can get to Syracuse, New York in 2 hours. But Kingston itself is a beautiful historic city. It's a tourist city in the summer. Lots of tourists come here because it was Canada's first capital city, and there's lots to see and do. It's on the Thousand Islands, which I believe are a World Heritage Site. And during the school year, it's a student town. There's Queens University. There's also the Canadian Royal Military College here. And there's also a community college called St. Lawrence College. So it's very much geared up for students. And for those pursuing an MBA as well, as I say, it really gives you a chance just to step out and reflect and really sink your teeth into the MBA experience. You don't have to commute back and forth. All the students pretty much, I would say 95% to maybe even 100% live within walking distance of the campus. So their whole year is geared towards what do I need to do in order to make this year the best I can from an academic point of view and from a career search point of view in order to achieve my goals. So it's MBA retreat is probably a term that I've heard the most in describing the way alumni describe their experience here in Kingston.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased having gone to like a small liberal arts school where it was basically a college town as well. And I think that's the reason why I'm still close to so many of my classmates. And I feel such strong like connection to, whenever they hold alumni events. But I know there's also people that love the big city. So
absolutely.
And I understand that as well.
And so do I. But then that comes back to one of those things that I think people legitimately need to ask. Like for someone, it just might not make sense for them. It just doesn't fit for them to live in a city the size of Kingston for a year. That's okay. That's why you go through this process of looking at all these different great programs around the world, and you find the one that's the best one for you. For the certain kind of student, this is absolutely the right place to be. But it's absolutely, you're right. People need to ask themselves that question. Do I want to live in a city of 150,000 people for a year?
Let's let's switch gears and talk about admissions. What are the fit qualities you're looking for from applicants to this boutique program?
I want to stay away from talking about, here's our minimum GMAT score and transcripts and work experience. I think all that stuff is, people can find that on the website. It tends to be fairly common across programs. Let me describe it in a different way than that. I think one characteristic that I look for first is people who I like to describe as success hounds. Hound as in the dog. So success hounds are these people, and we've all met them, who it seems that everything that they attempt to do, they're successful at. They're well-rounded. So you can see that in their transcripts. You can see that in their work experience in terms of the promotions they've gotten and what their references have said about them and who they've chosen for the references for that matter. You can see that in what they talk about in terms of what they do outside of their academics and work life. These are the people who are deeply involved in maybe it's community organizations, maybe it's volunteer boards, maybe they've started companies on the side while they were working. They've done high-level sports or music in some way. It's these people that just everything that they seem to have done in their life, they've found a way to be successful. That's the only way they know how to do things. So I'm looking for that record of someone who is just, again, they're a success hound. They will find a way to be successful at whatever it is they put their mind to. So success hounds, I think, would be one thing that we're looking for. I think some other characteristics that would make people successful in our program, they're in fact a prerequisite in some ways. You talked about the various coaches that we have here, Darren, and our team-based approach, and that we have 80 students all living here in Kingston, Ontario. We all work with them very closely on a day-to-day basis. You've got to be coachable. So it's one thing for us to have all of these coaches that are giving people advice about ways in which they can improve and get better and overcome challenges. But if people really aren't open to hearing that advice, then their needs aren't served, and certainly the resources that we have available are somewhat put to waste as well. So we want people who are coachable. Anyone who's putting together an application for us should try to include examples of them having been coached. And this doesn't necessarily mean that traditional, like on a sports field, for example. I mean, that's great. That's certainly one way of being coached. But we're all coached in different ways. I've had some amazing interviews over the years with people who have shared some really deep stories about, advice they've gotten from close family members during difficult times in their lives, or friends that have sort of taken them under the wing and just told them something that made them go down a different and a better path. So we're looking for people who are coachable. And I think that the twin to being coachable is being self-aware. You've got to be willing to acknowledge and find out what your limitations are, what your strengths are, and do an honest inventory of what those different factors are that make you who you are, so that you can constantly reflect on yourself and improve. I guess a final thing, which probably relates to the success hound piece, is we're really looking for people who know how to work hard and are also resilient. And I know resiliency is a bit of a catchphrase out there today, but I think it says a lot about people who have put their mind to something, or indeed their body to something that's really, really difficult, and they found a way to get through it. And the only way they could get through it was by just working hard day after day after day after day. And also people who have, in the face of working hard and putting all of their mental abilities into something and then not getting the outcome that they wanted, that is being unsuccessful, those who didn't take that as a defeat, but were resilient and found a way to either learn from that particular episode or find a different way in order to take on that challenge again and become successful. So I think that record of hard work and resiliency is also important to us.
I really love these three qualities. I haven't heard Success Hound as a fit quality, on this podcast, but I'd like to challenge you a little bit on this. A lot of MBA applicants feel like they have to present themselves as knights in shining armor in the way that maybe they can do nothing wrong. They find success in the workplace, outside the workplace, in their communities or however. But I think that many times the reality of life is that we don't succeed in everything we do. I'm just wondering if it's okay for some of those applicants who maybe haven't succeeded in everything they've tried really hard at, how they can convey that to your admissions office, right? Even though they might have failed. Sorry, that was a bit kind of meandering, but
no, not at all,
yeah.
Darren. And actually, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to expand on this, because by Success Hound, I don't mean that we are looking for people who have had records of glittering achievement in every single aspect of their lives. Some people have, but let me give you an example of someone who I made an offer to actually in the last couple of months. So this was an applicant who did not have a very good undergraduate academic record. No one would look at their academic record and say, oh, that's a glowing record of achievement. There were some failures in there. I think they squeezed through with a GPA that would have been well below our minimum. But they had a very strong GMAT score, and they had, really good work experience. So in my interview with this person, I asked them, I said, wow, looking at your transcript, tell me what happened? Why did it go so poorly? And what they shared with me was that they got into the top university in their country, into the most difficult program in their country. And I checked these facts afterwards, and this was absolutely true. And they came from a family that did not have a lot of financial means. So this program was also quite expensive. He did not come from a background where they could just had the money to fund him to go through. So he spent all of his undergraduate career basically working the equivalent of a full-time job as an 18 to a 22-year-old in order to get through this program. And I asked him at one point, I said, there must have been times when you felt like quitting. Why didn't you? And he said, yeah, there were times when I felt like quitting, but he remembered his father having said to him once that, there are things in life that if you don't see them through, you will always regret it. So I don't want you to stop this, even though it's difficult. We'll find a way as a family to help you to get through this. So on paper, again, this person doesn't look like a success hound because they've got this transcript that isn't glowing by any means. But my conversation with them and learning more about them and what their circumstances were helped me to see that this person overcame a lot, A, just to get into this program, and B, to find their way through it. And in order to do that, they had to show a lot of those characteristics that I talked about earlier, like hard work and resiliency and being self-aware. So, yeah, I don't want people to think that, everyone who applies to our program has to have a perfect record in every area that we're looking for. That's unrealistic. Certainly my life hasn't been that way, Darren. There's been times where things didn't go as well for me as I wish they did. But if people can share a story to help to understand what their circumstances were, I think that it can still be as compelling.
Yeah, or even maybe what success means to them, right? Because that's different for them
Yes.
as well. I noticed that one of your criteria that I found very interesting was integrity and strong sense of ethics. Now, I think probably most top MBA programs want candidates with integrity, but how are you able to evaluate that?
It's really tricky to evaluate that. I mean, I think to some extent there's a bit of a gut feel that you get when you're just dealing with someone. Certainly when people are applying through our program, and this would be good advice for actually people applying to any program, when you're working with the various admissions officers or the admissions team or other people you're interacting with at the school, understand that every interaction and everything that you say is going to be noted. So for us, probably the most typical place where we're going to pick up an integrity or an ethics issue would be during that process, where someone sort of shares something that is later shown to be not true. It's amazing how much you can do now on the back end in terms of, as I said, with the candidate who I was talking about just now, I could do a lot of research to find out if the story they were telling me was true in terms of, okay, what is the reputation of this university and what is the reputation of their program? So if I had found out that the program they got into wasn't actually as difficult as they told me that it was, that would have called into question their integrity and ethics. LinkedIn, obviously, is another. Get your LinkedIn in order, people, if you're applying to an MBA, because top MBA programs will check it and will check it carefully. Last week, we had someone who we interviewed. Basically, their record of employment was different than what they shared in the interview, according to LinkedIn. These are things that are not as difficult for us to uncover as perhaps they were, 15, 20 years ago. Obviously, references is another one. We do get the contact information for references. Do we call every reference? No, we don't. But we certainly do spot check the odd reference. And if there's any kind of question that we're unsure of, then we will absolutely call the reference to verify details.
Yeah. Speaking of references, your admissions process is very unique in that you require 3 of them. And so, I'm wondering, why you do that and who you want applicants to get as the recommenders.
So why do we do the references? We don't do traditional essays. So there's no written essay beyond the cover letter for us. We have students do video essays, and they serve a different purpose than what a written essay would. But we find that we get more value out of references than we do formal written essays. And I think the reason for that is twofold. The first thing is that we put it on the applicant to decide who they're going to provide us as references. So what I like to tell applicants to our program is that a good reference is someone who is familiar with the way that you interact with other people and has a good sense of your leadership qualities. So that could be a supervisor, for example, but we also understand that many people who are currently working at a job aren't necessarily comfortable with running to their supervisor and saying, hey, guess what? I'm applying to an MBA. Thinking of leaving, can you be a reference? Certainly some are in a situation where that works. So supervisors, past supervisors are good references. If people are in a client-facing role, I love seeing client or customer references. If you provided really fantastic customer service to a client, and they're willing to rave about that in a reference, and they got to know you fairly well during your interactions with them, that's a good reference. Similarly, a supplier. If you've been working with suppliers and they've always been really happy with your interactions, that's valuable as well. I mentioned earlier, if you've done work outside of your academics or your work life, if you've been involved with volunteer organizations or boards that you've volunteered to be on, or religious organizations that you've been a part of that you've done a lot of work for, these are all good references for us. And it also gives us a little bit more insight to you as a person beyond which, a traditional resume and GMAT score and transcript would supply us with. So I guess a long answer short, Darren, the reason that we do 3 references is that we want to see who the candidate presents to us. And then we want to see, obviously, what they say about this person in terms of the contributions that they made to their lives or interactions that they had with them.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting admissions philosophy that the testimonial is equally, if not more important, right, than how the candidate presents. Well, obviously, you're evaluating how the candidate presents themselves, but placing that extra weight on the reference I find really interesting. And the video questions, could we talk a little bit about those? Like how,
of course,
how long, are they like 2-minute answers? What's the format, and what should applicants beware of?
Sure. So the video essays happen towards the end of the process. Really, it's all done from your laptop or whatever device you care to use, and it's done online. And what will happen is you'll go to the website that we'll provide you a link to, and you'll get a chance to do as many practice sessions as you want just to get comfortable with the process. And the process is not complicated. Basically, you will see someone come up on the screen. Perhaps it's me, it's someone from the admissions team, and they will ask you a question. And these are not questions that are skill testing or fact-based things that you can study for. These are questions about something like, tell me about a time when you had difficulty working with a teammate, or tell me about a global issue that's important to you. After that question's asked, on the screen, it will show up how much thinking time the candidate has. Typically, it's something like 15 to 30 seconds for you to gather your thoughts. Then your webcam will automatically come on, and you'll typically have between 30 and 60 seconds to answer the question. And then when the time runs down to 0, the webcam will automatically turn off. In terms of what we're looking for here, we like doing this because it's unpredictable. You don't know what question you're going to get. And with the rest of the admissions process, besides the face-to-face interview or Skype interview, which can also be somewhat planned for, you can basically plan out everything the way that you like in terms of what you present to us. But the video essay is ambiguous. And another thing that we work really closely with students on during the time that they're here is being comfortable with ambiguity. And that's because that's what employers, another characteristic that they want, is that they want students who are able to look at a situation, not have all of the information that they perhaps need, but then either find a way to get that information and make a decision, or just move forward without that imperfect information, without being sort of paralyzed or flummoxed by the situation. So we like the fact that it's ambiguous and that students can't really prepare. I would also recommend, in terms of advice for the video essays, obviously you're presenting yourself in a formal way to the admissions committee. So dress appropriately is the same way that you would for an admissions interview. And then also make sure, because you're on the webcam, that there's no distracting noises or sights. We've seen some interesting things over the years, Darren. So just be aware that it's a professional context, and don't have your father walking behind the camera in his house or something.
Yeah, no, I just laugh because I've helped a couple of clients with like interview prep, and I think that's something, it just slips their mind that the background of your webcam is really important. So just, obviously present yourself professionally, but I'm sure you've seen lots of funny stuff. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about that interview, because I get the sense that it's very important in your admissions process, especially with like trying to get people that work well in teams, that, present themselves well. Do you do behavioral interviews, or what type of interviews do you do?
Yeah, they're, for the most part, they're behavioral interviews. We don't do any casework with the students during the interview process for the program. Obviously, when they get here and they're looking at future careers, they're going to do a lot of that work with our career coaches. But the interviews for admissions are, I would characterize them as behavioral. And really what we're looking to do in those interviews is give the candidate an opportunity for us to get to know them a little bit better, share any information that they feel we need to know that wasn't clear during the application process thus far. Also, it's an opportunity for us to clarify. So I mentioned the example a few minutes ago about the student who had the patchy academic record. The interview there served exactly the purpose that we like them to do, which was this was an opportunity for this person to very much clarify what their situation was and make us feel much more strongly about this person being a good fit for our program. It's not a time where we're really going to be looking at measuring something like your academic fit for the program. By the time you've got to the interview, we've had a chance to look at your GMAT score. We've seen your transcript. We have a pretty good sense that you have the academic horsepower to manage the program. Again, if there's some questions in there, we'll ask you about them, but it's not really where we're looking for that academic fit so much. We're going to dive into issues like coachability and team. We will sometimes even provide spontaneous coaching during an interview, just to see how someone reacts. Can you try that answer again? Because I just didn't feel that it was very clear, or you weren't making eye contact during that entire answer. Can you try that answer again? Just try to hold our eye contact long as you can, just to see, again, does this person seem open to coaching, and how do they respond in that kind of situation?
That's great. And how important are career goals for your admissions team?
So that's something that we want to get a sense of in your cover letter. So for us, the cover letter needs to really spell out for us why it is that you're pursuing an MBA, why you think that we would be a good fit, and where you're hoping to get at the end of the MBA. And I don't mean to suggest that people need to know exactly what they're going to be doing when they're finished their MBA. That, I want to be working in consulting for one of the big 4 consulting firms in this kind of strategy operations role, whatever. Some people come in with that kind of clarity, but not everybody does, and that's entirely fine. But what you should have is a narrative that makes it clear that the MBA is going to propel your career forward in one or two expected ways. And that narrative has to make sense. There has to be some logical flow to it. So if you're hoping to work for, again, one of the big consulting firms, then you need to have a record of achievement and things in your profile that suggest that that's possible, and that we know that you've done your homework to see that you'd be a good fit for some of those companies. Similarly, though, we get candidates who, and I'm sure every program does, who they come into the program, they're dead set on consulting, and 2 months in the program, they decide, you know what, no, it's technology. I had no idea that all these opportunities existed at all these technology companies now. I've always been a bit of a technology person. I love my gadgets. I'm going to try to pivot into technology. That's what your career coach is there to work with you on. We don't want people obviously jumping around every 3 weeks that they're exposed to something new to saying, this is what I'm going to be doing next. But those kinds of transitions are completely viable. But the key thing that we're looking for in that cover letter is that there's a viable narrative about, I feel like I've sort of hit my limit in my current industry or my current role, and the MBA is going to propel me into something different.
No, I've really enjoyed this admissions section talk with you. Would you have any last tips to applicants to improve their chances of admissions to Queens?
Yeah, beyond what I've said, what we're really looking for, if I can distill it into 4 different kind of buckets or characteristics. So the first thing is that you have the academic background or intellectual horsepower to manage the program. We're a 12-month program. There's not a lot of time for students to sort of sit on their heels. They have to be learning quickly. They have to pick things up fast, and they also have to be managing career search during that time. So you've got to be sharp. So do what you can to show us that you have that kind of academic background and ability to manage the program. I talked about work ethic before. We're really looking for people who have a really solid work ethic. So in whatever ways you can, show us that you're someone who knows how to just roll up their sleeves and work hard when they need to, and that you've been able to do that towards success at other points in your life and career. I mentioned the Olympic athletes that we have in our program now, Darren, and these are not your traditional MBA students. Both of our students in the program now, they've never worked beyond training to be in the Olympics. And so they're not presenting with the typical kind of work experience that our other students do. But what they bring in spades is this ability to set a target, set a goal, work their tails off in order to achieve it. And that approach is something that we're looking for in all of our candidates, that you're goal oriented and you really know how to work hard and you know how to overcome difficulty and not give up at the first sign of difficulty. The third thing that we're looking for is related to, and I won't go into any more detail because we've talked about it a lot, is the coachability and team skills. So you've got to at least have some ability in those areas. You can't have been sort of a lone wolf so far in your career and in your academic life. If you are and you enjoy working and learning that way, our program is not the right fit for you. So those coachability and team skills. And the final thing, if I could maybe this goes with a, I guess, as part of your question about a tip as well. But the fourth thing that we're looking for is really, really advanced, well-developed interpersonal skills. social skills. Like, are you able to get along well with other people? I want my interaction with candidates during the interview to be pleasant, to be conversational, for me to learn something about them as people. So my advice, I think, finally would be that to remember that admissions committees are people just like candidates are, and we're trying to build a relationship here. So you can't build a relationship with someone if you're just sort of blindsiding them with all the things that you think they want to hear about your academic profile and how successful you've been at work and what your post-MBA career goals are. Those are all important, but as you're communicating those things, also do your best just to develop a real, genuine human relationship with the admissions team and the people who are interviewing you.
Save up to $13,000 with a low-interest MBA loan from Common Bond. Common Bond has funded over $1 billion in student loans, and their easy online application only takes minutes. To learn more, visit commonbond.co/touchmba. Common Bond Lending, LLC, NMLS number 1175900. Yeah, so what do you guys think of that new sponsor music? I want to give a shout out to Anderson .Paak. That's his song The Birds from his album Malibu. Great artist, go support him. But I also want to make an announcement as we're doing an interview with a top Canadian business school. We actually have a very thorough and complete guide to top MBA programs in Canada where you can compare programs like Queens to other top programs in Canada, like say Rotman MBA or Ivy MBA or the Schulich MBA. We hear all the time from applicants that this is something they always need, right? A way to compare top schools in the regions they're looking at. So we've spent a lot of time and effort on our Canada guide. So go check that out at touchmba.com/guides. All right, back to my conversation with Matt. Let's talk about scholarships. Obviously, a big concern is financing the MBA degree for so many applicants. Could you tell us more about scholarship opportunities at the Queens MBA and how applicants can improve their chances of winning one?
Yes, of course. So I guess the first thing that I'll point out is that there's no separate application for any of our scholarships. Students are automatically considered. And if you go onto the Queens MBA website, you can learn more about some of the scholarships that we have available. Some of them have specific criteria attached to them, but most of them are are merit-based. We have a couple of needs-based scholarships, but most of them are merit-based. And so how do people improve their chances in order to get one of these scholarships? Well, it comes back to really the same factors that we've been talking about in admissions. So we want people who have really solid academic backgrounds, have been working in careers where they've been able to be have some success rather, and have shown some progression in their duties or their role. We're looking for people who, again, have a record of having worked successfully in teams and coached, having been coached and coaching others. And we're looking for people who are able to articulate a very clear reason as to why they want to do the MBA. I mean, as you mentioned, Darren, in the preamble to your question, I mean, an MBA degree is not inexpensive. We're not in the business of asking people to pay this amount of money for an MBA and then not have a good sense that they're going to be successful coming out the other side. We need people who we know are going to have a fairly clear path to success when they're finished, and we've shown some success in that area in terms of our not only our 6-month post-graduation success rate, which is 98%, but also our salary after graduation. Getting people to be eligible for the scholarships is really just showing all of those characteristics that we've been looking for in the admissions process.
And with scholarships, do you evaluate, for example, where applicants are coming from? like nationality wise, or is it really just based on kind of how they stack up against the rest of the class?
Yeah, so it's the latter. So we don't have any sort of criteria that we have this many scholarships for Canadians or anyone else in the world. We have one scholarship called the Opportunity Scholarship that happens to be only available to Canadians because that's what the way the donor wanted it to be. But that's the exception, and that's only one of many, many, many scholarships. So no, we don't have any criteria that are tied to nationality.
And would it be safe to say that you could help your scholarship chances by scoring a higher GMAT?
Yeah, you could certainly help them, but I would also say that you could help your GMAT chances by giving a fantastic interview and having a really, really strong transcript and having references that sing your praises. And all those other factors go into the calculation as well when the admissions committee meets. So yes, a GMAT score helps, but it's not the only factor. And when you're looking at our top scholarships, like our Smith scholarships, for example, those scholarships are going to be made available to people who have strength in all of the areas that we're looking for. So yes, a high GMAT score helps, but I wouldn't say it necessarily helps more than any of the other success factors that we're looking at.
Yeah, I had to put you on the spot and just ask you that because that's how applicants are thinking. Like,
it is, and maybe I'll give another example of that. Applicants do think that. Certainly from our perspective, I can assure you that that's not the way we do things. There are people who apply to our program every year with GMAT scores in the mid 700s, and we say no to some of them, not just to scholarship, but for entrance into our program, because the GMAT really is only one piece of your application profile. And if you have other things in your application that quite simply aren't a good fit for us, you're not going to be well served by coming here, and we're ultimately not going to be successfully able to help you. So it's not the only thing.
In terms of careers, what do you think makes the Queens MBA special from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, if I can put on my sort of boasting hat a little bit, I think we're more successful at it than anyone else, and our numbers speak to that.
Yeah, let's hear it.
In Canada, they do, and why is that? You mentioned the 12-month MBA, which means we have to be really, really careful with who we admit into our program, Darren. And that doesn't necessarily just mean in terms of their qualifications for our program. Some people would be better served by a slower paced MBA than ours. Fantastic applicants who we'd love to have in our classroom, but we know during the process of working with them that a 1-year MBA may not be the best fit for them. They're dead set on making sure they get an internship between that first and second year. They're just not really that clear on what they want to do post MBA, and they want to take their time to figure that out. These are entirely legitimate things for a candidate to be thinking about, but it means that they're not a really great fit for us. So they should be looking at other programs. So I think our selection process. We have our Business Career Center representatives are at every interview, and they sit at our AdCom. So I think that's one of the reasons that makes us perhaps different and perhaps we're good at this, is that we're not just making decisions in isolation as an academic program. We invite the Career Center to have a voice at the table and tell us what they think about candidates, and mostly obviously from their employment outcome point of view. The coaching certainly helps. The career coaches that we have, we've got a fantastic team. They're all organized by industry. So we have, I think, 17 different industries that once students are in a certain pathway, be it healthcare, be it technology, finance, consulting, whatever, they will work with a coach who has expertise in that area. Like other top MBA schools, we're really lucky to have a robust alumni network, not just of MBA students, but we have 13 programs at Smith School of Business. So we graduate a lot of students every year, and Queen's students love helping each other out, and they're certainly actively involved in helping us with the career search for MBA candidates. So, and I think the other, this is perhaps less tangible. The Career Center and me and others who work with the students, we love it. We love what we do. And there's few better feelings than, working with someone through the admissions process, working with them during the program, and then watching them transition into a really successful career afterwards when they become, alumni and friends. It's a great moment when you get that call from the student who tells you, you know what, I just landed that job that I've been set on for months and months and months. I'm so happy and thank you. I mean, it's a fantastic feeling. So I think there's that's what we live for. That's why we do our job. It's for that reason. So there's a passion, I think, that helps us as well.
That's awesome. And do you expect that division of placements that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast to remain similar over the next, couple of years in terms of, I think you said, 25% to a third of the class go into finance and consulting and then other careers?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict. Certainly some trends that I've seen, and speaking to my some of my colleagues at other business schools around the world, certainly technology is an area that continues to grow. The big tech firms are really making an active push to hire more and more MBA students, and we see more students coming in who are targeting technology companies. Healthcare continues to be a growing field in Canada and around the world. Many of the consulting firms are getting their healthcare practices not only up and running, but certainly expanded. Entrepreneurship and innovation continues to be another area where more and more people decide that they want to try something on their own. So it's hard to predict. I imagine that that roughly the majority being finance and consulting. I foresee that happening, certainly staying for the next couple of years. But there's some other really interesting opportunities out there now that I see more and more students being drawn to. So we'll see.
Most applicants applying for an MBA really want to boost, like you said, propel their careers in a certain direction. And I guess what I'm trying to look for is, what are the type of students you've seen who are able to do that in a 1-year time frame?
So I think the students who are most successful in our program and who are the most the easiest to work with is they're people who can manage the academic demands of the program well. They're able to also not neglect their career search activities at the same time. And they do it all with a smile on their face, even when things are tough. So there are periods in our MBA program, as in others, when students are feeling like, wow, this is really tough. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're tired. Maybe they've had an outcome either in a course or on the career search side that didn't happen the way that they wanted it to. And it's those students who, when they're faced with those challenges, they're sitting with you in their office and they take a deep breath and they say, okay, what do we need to do now to move on? What do we need to do next? So it's those people who keep pushing forward, who keep driving. They're the ones who are able to build really strong relationships with others, classmates, faculty, administrators during the time. As I say, they walk around with a smile on their face for the most part. And when they don't have a smile on their face, they come to you and they tell you about what their challenges are and you try to help them out. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That's very clear. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that person. Last question on careers. The U.S. now with our President Trump, I've noticed there's a lot of concern, especially from the international community, applicant community, about, I just got into this great program in the U.S., but I'm really uncertain with whether I'll be able to travel to and from the country, to my country. Could you talk a bit more about Canada's visa policy and how this could be an advantage to students?
Sure. I mean, and I guess I'll preface this by saying that I am not a visa officer or an immigration officer for Canada. So, go to your local Canadian embassy or mission or website to get all the most up to date relevant details. But in broad terms, I would say that Canada stands out in terms of its approach to international MBA students coming to this country. Our immigration policy is set up to make it as easy as possible for those students to stay here when they are finished and work in Canada. These are exactly the kind of people that the Canadian government and indeed Canadians want to stay in Canada. We're proud of our history as an immigrant nation. We know that that's led to our success on the world stage and indeed just as a country. So what happens for a student after they're finished their MBA program is they're guaranteed a work visa to work in Canada. That will be a minimum of 1 year. It'll be 1 to 3 years, simply depending on, from what I can see, the sort of the vagaries of the immigration officer who's looking at the paperwork. But you're guaranteed the 1 year. The vast majority of our international students, we have roughly 40% in last year's class. The vast majority stay in Canada, because once you've been working in Canada for 3 years, you can apply for permanent resident status. So then you're on the pathway to citizenship and you can come and go from Canada as and when you see fit. So once you get employed by a Canadian company, you've got that 1 year open visa. That company will then sponsor your visa going forward. So you'll have a visa for as long as as you need one. Yeah, right now we feel that we're in a bit of a lonely position in terms of, what's some of the approaches that, you mentioned the United States and the Britain are taking towards MBA graduates working in their country, that our doors are open. We want these young talented people to come and study in Canada, and if they're willing and able, we want them to stay.
Yeah, no, that's crystal clear. Thanks for spelling that out. Wow. I mean, we've spoken for over an hour. I've enjoyed every minute of this. But I guess I have one last question, and that's just, is there anything else about the Queens MBA that you just wish more applicants knew about?
I think the best way for me to answer that question is that there's an approach to the way that we work with students here, which is, very personalized, and not just for the reasons that we talked about earlier, Darren, in terms of, the various ways that you can structure your program with exchanges or dual degrees or electives or that sort of thing. But we take a very personalized approach to the way that we work with students. And that's our coaching culture. I go out on the road, I do some recruiting myself, but I spend most of my time here with the students in Kingston. And there's this community that gets built here that is really hard to make clear in a brochure or on a website. So what I always recommend students to do, or prospective students, is if you go onto our website, you can actually find names and profiles of students who are currently in our program, and you can send a message to them and have an email conversation with them. But if possible, learn as much as you can about our approach. It is different, and if you can, and this goes for any program, it's not always possible, but visit the place, get a sense of how that school does things. Our approach, as I say, it's very personal. It's a community based. None of our students are from Kingston, Ontario. We've got 80 students, and they're coming from around the world. They're from Toronto, Vancouver, Hong Kong, Delhi, or Bogota. But they're not from Kingston. So we very quickly every year evolve into this tight knit community, and that's something that it's really hard to come across in a brochure, but it's something that makes our program unique, I would say.
Yeah, well, I think the culture of the Queens MBA and what you're looking for has at least come across crystal clear to me. So thank you, Matt, for your time and your insights. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will find this very useful. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Darren, for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who listened to the podcast. Please feel free to get in touch with me directly if you have any questions or anything you'd like to discuss further.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll be sure to link to your website and how to contact you guys. So thanks again.
Thanks, Darren.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.